United States may have churned out the highest number of serial killers in the world over the years.
The serial killer, claiming to have more than 90 victims, admits 2 of them happened right here in the Cincinnati area.
But it certainly doesn't hold exclusive rights on brutal murders. In fact, serial killing as a practice dates back thousands of years. And some of the world's most violent and prolific criminals have lived in different locations. Here is the top 10. Number 10. Albert Fish. When a serial killer is dubbed the Brooklyn Vampire, the Moon Maniac, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Gray Man, and the Boogeyman, it's almost certain he is thoroughly deranged. Fish was tried and found guilty of raping, killing, and cannibalizing 3 children in the early 1900s. However, he claimed that he had murdered more like 100 children, and even boasted that he had children in every state. Especially deranged is the fact that Fish sent a letter to the mother of one of his victims, 10-year-old Grace Budd. The letter detailed how he had lured the little girl, strangled her, and then cut her into pieces to eat over the course of 9 days. Number 9. Joachim Kroll. German serial killer Joachim Kroll murdered at least 14 people, including young children, between 1955 and 1976. After strangling his victims with his bare hands, Kroll would have sex with their corpses, then cut them up in pieces to eat. Interestingly, Kroll was finally caught after a neighbor complained about a backup in the plumbing. The pipes were clogged with human remains. When Kroll was arrested, he was in the process of simmering body parts taken from his most recent victim, 4-year-old Marion Ketter. Number 8. Andrei Chikatilo. Between 1978 and 1990, the Russian serial killer Andrei Chikatilo sexually assaulted, murdered, and mutilated more than 50 young women and children. Chikatilo killed his victims by stabbing and slashing them with a knife. One of the youngest was 9 years old. Chikatilo later admitted that he was only able to achieve orgasm by stabbing women, a fact which made it difficult for him to resist his strong urges to kill. Chikatilo was nicknamed the Butcher of Rostov, the Red Ripper, and the Rostov Ripper. Though he confessed to a total of 56 brutal murders, he was tried for 53, sentenced to death, and executed by firing squad in 1994. Number 7. Ted Bundy. Bundy is easily one of the most deranged serial killers, not to mention kidnappers, rapists, burglars, and necrophiles of all time. His modus operandi included kidnapping his female victims, raping them, and then dismembering them. He often kept their heads as souvenirs. Before he was executed in 1989, Bundy admitted to kidnapping and murdering 30 women, though this number is almost certainly much higher. Number 6. Jeffrey Dahmer. No list of the most deranged serial killers would be complete without Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, was ultimately convicted of murdering 17 young men over a 14-year period. But Dahmer didn't just murder them, he also raped, dismembered, and sometimes even ate his victims. During his trial, Dahmer admitted to drilling a hole into his victims' heads in an attempt to turn them into mindless sex slaves. Although Dahmer likely would have been executed for his crimes, he was beaten to death in prison in 1994. Number 5. John Wayne Gacy. Also known as the Killer Clown due to the fact that Gacy would throw parties at which he would don a clown suit and makeup acting under the guise of Pogo the Clown. Gacy was convicted of the rape and murder of some 33 young men during the years of 1972 and 1978, most of which he buried underneath his own home. He was executed in 1994 by lethal injection. Gacy managed to shock everyone when his crimes were uncovered, as he was a popular political and local figure at the time, living a seemingly normal life. Supposedly, his last words were, "Kiss my ass." Number 4. Harold Shipman. Nicknamed Dr. Death, Harold Shipman is thought to be responsible for murdering 218 of his patients between 1972 and 1998. In reality, the number of people he murdered is likely much higher. As a practicing physician, Shipman had easy access to potential victims, which is why he was able to be such a prolific killer without raising suspicion. However, because Shipman was involved in so many cases in which patients died, people eventually began to suspect foul play. Most of his patients were elderly women, whom he said had died in their sleep. But many of these women died during the day, which struck some as odd. Additionally, Shipman asked for an unusually large number of cremation certificates, which caught the attention of an undertaker who reported the odd circumstances of the cremations. Eventually, Shipman was convicted in 2000, but only after a victim's daughter reported that he had tried to write a will for the victim that would name him as the beneficiary. He died by suicide in prison in 2004. Number 3. Pedro López. Pedro López's deranged killing spree is terrifying enough, but perhaps even more terrifying is the fact that López's current whereabouts are unknown. The native of Colombia claims to have raped and killed more than 300 women across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. At least 100 of these were tribal women. In 1980, the monster of the Andes was arrested and led police to the graves of 53 victims between the ages of 9 and 12. López was found guilty of murdering 110 girls in Ecuador. He also confessed to an additional 240 murders in Peru and Colombia and was declared insane. Incredibly, López was released in 1998 for good behavior, and while there are plenty of rumors, no one can confirm exactly where he is today. The last time he was seen was on September 22, 1999, when he went to the National Registry of Bogota to claim his new citizenship card. Number 2. Javed Iqbal. Child murderer and rapist known as Kukri, Iqbal murdered 100 street children by strangling them and covering up his crimes by dissolving the bodies with acid.
ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा फांसी खुदा तो मेरी हस्ती को भी नबूस कर देता अगर खुदा एक आदमी, दो आदमी, 3 आदमी, 10 आदमी, 15 आदमी, 20 आदमी खुदा का नाम।
He was arrested in 1999 after sending a letter to a newspaper and was set to be executed in the manner described by the judge, who stated, "You will be strangled to death in front of the parents whose children you killed. Your body will then be cut into 100 pieces and put in acid, the same way you killed the children." However, he died in custody before he could be executed. Number 1. Luis Garavito. Child murderer, torture killer, and rapist known as La Bestia, the Beast, Garavito confessed to killing 140 boys between 6 and 16 years old from October 1992 to April 1999 in Colombia and neighboring countries. He is suspected of murdering over 300 victims, mostly street children. Garavito was originally sentenced to 1,853 years in prison. But this was later reduced to 22 after he led police to many of the bodies of his victims. He is scheduled to become eligible for parole in 2023. The killer terrorized the country during a years-long crime spree in which he molested little boys, slit their throats, tied them up, and mutilated them. He confessed to raping and killing 140 boys, mostly between the ages of 8 and 16 in Colombia, but it is believed he actually murdered more. If there's a thing that true crime shows have taught us, it's that serial killers can blend among us in plain sight. They're not the obvious bad guy in a trench coat, or the psychopath with wild hair who screams at everyone they meet. Instead, they come off as perfectly normal people with normal jobs and normal families. In fact, some of the most famous serial killers in history were actually quite good at keeping their evil deeds secret for years, before anyone found out what they were really up to. Many made headlines for their horrifying crimes and got away with them for a long time before being caught.